Ah, Resto Druid, the one that heals our hearts in our dungeon groups. The meta changed for the tree lovers and they still shine very brightly in dungeons and alright in raids. So you know what's coming? That's right, talents, gear, rotation, corruptions and more. Tips and tricks to polish your Resto Druid in 8.3 as we cover the last spec in the game. We did it! You did it! Fart boobs. Resto Druid is one of many specs you can catch us play on stream at twitch.tv/Marcelian Online. We stream 5 days a week, both BFA and Shadowlands, and even run keys and raids with you nerds sometime. Check it out. Now back to our regular schedule. The first row has all three options viable. Abundance is a good raid option when you can maintain at least 4 rejuvenates out on people, making your regrowth a very strong single target heal choice. Outside of this, regrowth is usually a hard heal to find effective and efficient in terms of its cost, especially in long drawn-out fights. Scenario Ward is a decent option for all content, but usually shines better in dungeons. Adding the extra hot to a tank or someone taking heavy damage dips deeper into your mastery, giving you overall more healing, not just from the talent itself. Prosperity is a situational pick. Overall throughput is probably lower than the other two, but if you play in higher keys or in scenarios where you want to deal as much damage as possible, you can take this and minimize the time you spend casting so you can be efficient with your GCDs. Works best with Soul of the Forest in terms of synergy, but not something we would recommend, especially if you're starting right away with Resto Druid. Second row concerns mobility, and really the choice is yours. Tiger Dash tends to be a raid favorite since the movement requirements actually fit this way better. You don't have to zip off and around the battlefield, and when shit hits the fan, the burst of speed from this one is crazy good. Wild Charge can be your default for all scenarios though. It's a very cool and versatile talent that gives you multiple options of what you can use it for. Feral Leap in Cat puts you behind the target to instantly deal damage. Caster Form lets you jump to an ally, and Travel Form simply jumps around, like how a real deer would 100% do when running away from predators. Renewal is a specific choice here. If you don't need the extra mobility, you can take this, but more specifically, if you know you will be hit by something that could be lethal or take you very low frequently throughout the fight. This can be your best tool. This usually tends to happen in very high content or when you are severely undergeared, assuming that the said thing that hit you cannot simply be dodged by, Tiger Dashing or while charging away. Moving down, we have the Druid Roll. All three affinities have their uses, and it's important how you play them to make the choice worth it. Guardian Affinity is the tanky version. This works really well when you want or need to soak certain mechanics that can have their damage reduced by the thick hide of the bear. Off-tanking isn't really a thing you can do in BFA, maybe in Shadowlands, but there's also the Switch Hitter Azurite trait that can pack around 16% avoidance when you bear shift and frenzy regen. The effect is very strong, but also very situational, as in you would sacrifice at least one much better option on this row just to benefit from that effect, and it would only be worth it if in exchange you actually prevent yourself from dying. Balance Affinity is usually better in raids, increasing your overall spell range by a few yards. You'll find this particularly useful when people are spread around, where without this, you would have to run around the place to, hot pools and keep them alive. But really, once you get comfortable with the spec, and especially when pushing mythic keys, Feral Affinity will be your end goal. The movement speed is nice, sure, but going into Cat and dealing damage is something that Resto Druids do it pretty easy. You're hot, and as a consequence, your healing goes through even when you are in Cat form, due to, the nature of overtime effects. This is a bit more advanced, so not something you should focus on if you are starting out, but something you should aim for regardless. Fourth row brings with it utility and crowd control. You'll most likely go to Typhoon for interrupt, knockback, kite, and other needs, usually more prominent in dungeons. There are raid fights with ads that can be CC'd though. If you really need that, you can and probably should go with Mass Entanglement, specifically on fights like Skitra for the Illusion Wall or Hive Mind to root darters and help your group DPS them down quicker. Mostly, Mass Entanglement will be a very good tool to deal with things from beyond, regardless of content. Mighty Bash is a single target stun, and nowadays everyone and their mother has these, and losing out on the two other options is just too much, a big loss in value, not worth it. The 5th tier brings more options. Incarnation is a big cooldown that outputs a decent amount of healing for 30 seconds. This is better in raids where you can time this with a boss phase that deals a lot of damage to your raid for a long period of time. Depending on how long that is and how much your group needs it, you have to discuss it with your co-healers, because if you end up popping it and in 10 seconds everyone is full HP, you are either not taking full advantage of it, the other healers are also popping some of their own cooldowns, making yours and probably theirs less efficient, or the raid is just not taking enough damage to justify it. Cultivation is the Mythic Plus alternative, although if Tree isn't worth it in raids, Cultivation might be a better option there as well. In dungeons, your tank and group will generally be below 60% HP more often than in raids for this to be viable. Depending on the affixes, the uptime of this can be higher or lower. Soul of the Forest is a very specific pick that alters your playstyle and mindset a bit. It offers less consistent healing, but more bursts in big regrowths and wild growths. This can have uses in both raids and dungeons, and my suggestion is to pair it up with Prosperity for more buffs and uptime on this particular talent. The 6th talent row comes with Spring Blossoms, which is a default for both raids and dungeons. This makes Efflorescence a really important spell. First off, the healing from it is always nice, if it can hit more than one person. More than that, it adds a small heal over time to your group that dips into your mastery, making all other hots on your targets tick harder. It does require the secret mechanic of people actually staying inside the area of effect, which sometimes proves to be more difficult than actually doing mechanics. Inner Peace is a good raid option, although can work in dungeons and is on the same mindset as Tree of Life. You get reduced overall healing, but pack it more in short bursts, this time in Tranquilities. But you would be losing Spring Blossom's consistent throughput, which you lose anyway, because green shit on the ground makes people think that it deals damage to them, like, stay in the fucking Efflor. Last row has Flourish as the default raid option. It's a small cooldown that extends your hots, and you can pair it with a Trank or whatever hot combos to get some neat throughput depending on the damage type your group is taking. More on this in the rotation. Alternatively, Photosynthesis is one of the better reasons Resto Druid is the top killer in Mythic Dungeon. The two interactions it has makes it so you reach over your group is also stronger, and it's more efficient, since dungeons tend to have more chaos baked into their combat phases. Use it on yourself or your tank based on what you want to accomplish. The decision will come down to experience, so don't hesitate to experiment with life blooming different targets and be what Blizzard meant you to be, a tree. That rhymed pretty good. Resto Druids are one of the easier healers to gear up, so rejoice! As far as raids are concerned, you want eye level to be your main focus as a stat, regardless of the secondaries, because all secondaries are good and very close to each other in value. Keeping a balance between them should probably be your goal. In dungeons, especially if you want to perform to the best of your abilities, eye level is still king, but try to focus on mastery next, with haste very close after it. Thing is, mastery is one of the strongest mechanics for Resto Druid, and it fits Mythic Plus scenarios pretty well. It's very easy to get at least 2 hots on every person in the group and keep them up long enough for you to deal damage and them benefiting from the passive healing. In dungeons, people will be more stacked and inside Spring Blossoms. Add a Rejuvenation, Wild Growth, and Life Bloom on the tank, and you have 4 to 5 hots ticking for a decent amount of the time, each applying the mastery benefit to every other hot. There are 2 things I want to mention here. Versatility is a very interesting stat. It's actually simple in its effect and what you will get out of it. But most importantly, it reduces the damage you take, and in high-level content, dungeons and raids alike, this can be pretty valuable to have and stack. The only other time you would ignore the stat priority is if you have corruptions that increase a particular stat by a percentage. And at that point, stacking that stat in favor of others will net you more value, and the more of the corruption you have, the better that stat becomes. As such, we recommend getting the Accord of Mastery and Masterful Sea current for rings and sockets. If you are just gearing up, your eye level is low and things like that, it will be worth it to get Leviathan's Eye of Intellect in one of the sockets. As you gear up though, Intellect will lose out in value against the secondary stats, so keep that in mind. Machinist Brilliance will be your weapon enchant of choice, since stats are always good, and if you do intend to dip into a specific one, the enchant will proc more of it. Greater Flask of Endless Fathoms will be your Intellect Flask of choice, and Superior Battle Potion of Intellect can be used mid-fight if you want a bit of more to your healing for a short period of time. If you intend to do damage, you can pre-pot an Unbridled Fury potion, since there isn't much damaging going on when the combat starts, that you would need to heal anyway. Potion of Replenishment and Coastal Mana potions can help with mana issues in raids where you cannot drink as often as you can in dungeons. Depending on how well Intellect is simming for you in terms of healing, you can eat feasts, especially if they are provided as a consequence of raiding. And if not, Abyssal Fried Risole for the Mastery will be your food of choice. With that being said, some of the better Azurite traits for raiding focus mostly on stats, hence why Heart of Darkness stacked 3 times is numero uno. You can add 1 Lively Spirit for those Innervate windows. 1 Rampant Growth is good if you plan on using regrowths, and 1 Autumn Leaves is a solid option as well, and these last ones you want mainly for their unique effect, which doesn't fully stack. Other than this, take generic stat traits if you don't have any of the previous ones. Some of the more noticeable secondary and tertiary traits are Blood Siphon for the Leech, which is mathematically the strongest healing stat, albeit working only on you, Resounding Protection as maybe the strongest defensive option as well. In dungeons, you want 1 Grove Tending for the extra hot that we kept mentioning is good for keys. Heart of Darkness stacked is also good here, and you can fill in with as many High Noon traits as you can if you want to add some damage to your kit, which High Noon is exceptional at. Blood Siphon and Resounding Protection are still very good options in dungeons. There are 3 main major essences you can take in raids. Memory of Lucid Dreams and Ever Rising Tide are both good contenders, and with their different cooldown windows, you can choose the option that casting it off cooldown gives the most value from. Hence, things are pretty much tied to how your group is taking the damage you need to heal. A special mention to Vision of Perfection here. Not only do you get the cooldown reduction for Tranquility, which we discussed in the talents, but you also proc 1 stack of Tranquility on all group members, which is passive healing that you don't need to worry about, plus a hot that dips into Mastery. As for minors, Conflict and Strife is always a top contender. The high uptime on the high amount of versatility is invaluable. Ever Rising Tide is amazing if you pick Memory of Lucid Dreams as a major. Unwavering Ward is a good raid option when people aren't too spread or you just need the 10 corruption resistance. And Well of Eternity works better when people are actually spread. You can take the raid build if you don't want to deal damage in keys, and although we don't always recommend it, for this one we will recommend dealing damage. Crucible of Flame will be your default in most scenarios, and it can work as an instant heal as well. Formless Void is a better alternative if you have someone in your group that uses Meme Beam, which you can and should copy. Conflict and Strife will be your best minor, Ever Rising Tide and Spirit of Preservation as second and third options, or even Crucible of Flame as a minor if you run Formless Void major, so you can add even more damage if you feel you need it, and can pull it off. When you think of trinkets, think of Obsidian Claw. It's hands down the best healer trinket, and yes, mostly because of the mana return. That's clearly useful in raids, and the damage proc is not something to brush off, which is even more valuable in dungeons. Humming Black Dragon Scale or Alchemy Stone are good options in the other slot. The Dragon Scale provides a high uptime on haste procs, while Alchemy Stone is just a massive healing throughput boost all around. Outside of these, any stat trinket can hold the fort while you work towards getting the ones mentioned before. The raid drops 2 weapons you can be interested in, depending if you do Mythic or not for the extra eye level. Vorzjokal is a good startup corruption to have since Void Ritual is never really bad, and even better if 2 other nerds have it so you can proc all the stats in the world. You might end up cleansing it later on or even replacing it with Bloodstained Ritual Athame. That comes with Haste and Mastery, which will always be the 2 stats you want to focus on if you want to focus on any specific stats outside Versatility. Most top druids use this weapon, so it means it's good, right? That's how this works, right? Now that we can buy corruptions, it might still be too early to tell what the best in slot are, since it comes down to what content you do and want to excel at, and if min-maxing is something you want. Maybe you just want Twilight Devastations and Infinite Stars to make your DPS feel incredibly silly. Chances are, if you are serious about this video game, you want to start stacking corruptions that are focused around stats, specifically Expedients, Masterful, Versatile, and maybe Void Ritual? You probably shouldn't get all of these, but choose one. Expedient works for faster GCDs and hot ticks, and even better if you have damage proc corruptions. Also good in kitty form. Masterful is good for all of the reasons Mastery is good for also. While Versatile is just a flat percentage damage, heal, and damage reduction increase for both you and your corruptions. In raids, you want to keep Efflorescence on the tanks and melee, or at least 3 people that need healing or will need healing. Life Bloom on the main tank pretty much always. Wild Growth on cooldown if there are more people taking damage, ideally 6 targets. Cast it after the damage hits since the first ticks are the strongest. Rejuvenation on people that need healing or are about to take damage. Use Regrowths, especially with the Omen of Clarity procs, and Swift Mends on members that are fairly low in HP and need immediate attention. Resto Druid isn't great at reacting to damage, the damage that your group is taking, that is. So you need to know and prepare, otherwise you can fall behind and it will be hard to come back to a point where your group is stabilized. You always want to keep Life Bloom on the tank for single target healing, or yourself if you need to AoE heal the group, with Rejuvenation on at least the tank, depending on the damage that's about to come out. Efflorescence is also mandatory to be up 100% of the time under as many people as possible. Wild Growth when the group just took the damage, as long as it's more than just one person. Swiftmend is ideal to use for emergencies, and if you talent it into Soul of the Forest, keep in mind that the next Rejuve or Regrowth or Wild Growth will be empowered, and realistically you want to pair it up with Wild Growth as a priority. Cenarion Ward on the tank or the person taking the most damage, ideally used on cooldown. Use Regrowths with Omen procs. The way you optimize damage falls onto you and how much haste you have. The first thing to do and always keep up is Sunfire. With the High Noon trait, this will easily be your biggest damage output. Once you have some hots rolling out on the party and on potential targets that need them, swap to Kitty and start with Rake and a Shred or Swipe, and depending on the number of targets, use either one of the two. And apply Rip and Bite. The energy regen is pretty low with low levels of haste, so maybe it's worth popping out, repositioning the Efflorescence, or applying Hots and Sunfire again before going back into Cat Weaving. Cat Weaving lets you regenerate mana while dealing damage, and vice versa. When you pop out to apply some Hots, you can regenerate energy. If you know damage isn't coming out soon, you can trust your Hots to do the job and DPS in Kitty with no worries. You can use Innervate in the Innervate Bomb combo, aptly named by the community. Use Innervate 5 or so seconds before the damage will be coming out. Put out as many rejuvenations as you can, up to 8 usually. Cast Wild Growth just after the damage hits and use Flourish. This is an incredibly hot ramp up for a lot of efficient healing, costing you 0 mana. Pair these up with haste trinkets and procs and you can fit even more cooldowns in your Innervate window. The best way to use Tranquility, as long as you are not overhealing, always have Efflorescence with Spring Blossoms out on the group, use Wild Growth following the rules mentioned before, and pop Tranquility. This way your Trank gets the mastery benefit from 2 AoE Hots that take 2 GCDs to cast. The more Hot you have out prior to this, the stronger this becomes. This and more can be found in the Dreamgrove community, where you can chat with top Resto Druids for more advanced tips. One such Resto Druid, Ninja Ristic, helped with some feedback and we are super grateful for it. We also recommend checking the questionably epic website for some of the best Resto Druid info and their live tool that can help you sim trinkets, traits and other healing things. And thank you in no small part to the Patreons for supporting the channel and the content that we do. We love you guys and we are very grateful for your continued support. And if you, dear viewer, are interested in supporting our channel a little bit more, check the links down below. Thank you for watching the video and we'll see you in the next one.